If you've been following the Splatoon 2 metagame, you might have noticed that the Bubble Blower special has been seeing a lot more use lately, especially when combined with Special Power Up. I was reading through FLC's blog post on the state of the game and it mentioned various reasons for this, but the one that specifically caught my eye is the fact that Special Power Up doesn't give diminishing returns when used with Bubble Blower, unlike every other special in the game. It turns out there's a pretty simple mathematical explanation for this, so today I'm going to make some middle school teachers of mine proud and use some geometry to show you why Bubble Blower is so OP. The first step was to see what kind of formula Special Power Up used to power up each special in the first place. To do this, instead of testing things myself because I don't have the gear for it, I instead used the web tool loadout.inc. This is a very useful tool for testing how different gear builds will work and how well it synergizes with various weapons, and is indeed based on both data mine data and extensively researched data by a lot of players in the community. Now, the tool hasn't been completely updated for the latest version of the game and is missing a few weapons, but Special Power Up in and of itself hasn't been changed since the last time it was updated, so it'll still work perfectly fine for any of my testing. For those of you who don't know, gear abilities in Splatoon work on a point system, where each sub-ability is worth 3 points and each main is worth 10. That means that if you stack a total of 3 pures of the same ability, you'll have 57 points. But of course, diminishing returns are in effect, so the first 3 points you get from stacking one sub is going to be worth a lot more to whatever that gear ability's effect is than the next 3 points if you stack a second sub on. Unfortunately, loadout.inc doesn't have any Special Power Up data for the Bubble Blower, so I instead decided to test it out on 6 other specials. 4 of those were ones where Special Power Up simply increases duration, and I also threw in Splashdown, which has a size increase, and Baller, which has an HP increase for good measure. Then came the really arduous task of testing out each of the different point combinations with each of the 6 specials to create 6 data tables. Then I simply graphed points versus effect on the special's ability, either time, radius, or HP, in order to get a graph that I could use a trend line to determine the equation of. All 6 graphs have the same basic shape, and you might think that it's a square root graph based on that, but it turns out that these are actually upside down parabolas, and that it's an equation that's some sort of function of x squared, where x is the amount of points of Special Power Up, and y is the effectiveness of the special. The equations were all of the form y equals negative ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is usually a very small decimal, b is also usually pretty small, and c is whatever the base value of the special's ability is, be it duration, HP, or simply 100% for the radius of the splashdown. With all this information in mind, I then had to make a sample equation for Bubble Blower and plug all the point values into that. It is worth noting that I don't actually need to test to get the exact numbers in the equation for Bubble Blower, as long as the equation I use is of the same form as the others. With that in mind, and noting that Special Power Up's effect on Bubble is to increase the radius of them, I tweaked around with the numbers to try to get a graph that looked similar enough to the other ones, eventually settling on y equals negative 0.005x squared plus 0.5x plus 1, where 1 would be the default radius of a bubble. Now here comes the really important part. The hitbox of the Bubble Blower when it pops is spherical. The bigger that hitbox, the higher a chance you have of hitting enemies with it, and the more ground you can cover. The problem with that is, the formula for the volume of a sphere based on its radius is 4/3 pi times the radius cubed. If you take all the radii I calculated using my hypothetical equation and convert those into volumes, then plot those volumes against the points of Special Power Up, you'll see something very interesting. Even though the rate at which the radius is increasing is going down the more points you add, the rate in which the volume is increasing is still going up. If you put a trend line on the volume graph, it turns out that not only is it not increasing linearly, not only is it not increasing quadratically with an x squared term, but it's actually increasing cubically. If you use the radius diminishing returns equation I made, the volume equation turns out to be y equals negative 0.0012x cubed plus 0.1607x squared plus 0.2534x plus 6.0649. That means that the volume of these spheres, of these bubbles, is increasing cubically with Special Power Up, despite the fact that the radius has diminishing returns. This means that not only do diminishing returns not affect Bubble Blower in the slightest, stacking more actually increases the increase in their volume and in their effectiveness. This is exactly why the special power-up Bubble Blower build is so OP right now. You actually benefit more from stacking more special power-up as opposed to wanting to use it in moderation like you would with most other specials. Unfortunately, the last nerf that Bubble Blower got doesn't address this problem. It simply makes it easier for opponents to shrink your bubbles once they're below a certain size. This, of course, does absolutely nothing to change the fact that stacking special power-up makes the size enormous in the first place. Really, the only way to actually nerf this would be to change the effect of the diminishing returns, so that they're directly tied to the volume of the bubble and not the radius. This would mean that there would actually be both diminishing returns on the volume, and you couldn't get bubbles as big as you can now in the first place. Honestly, I'm not sure whether or not they'll actually do that. They're probably just going to make more patchwork nerfs to try to get it smaller again, but who knows? There are definitely more patches coming, there are definitely more updates coming, so stick around for my reviews on those patches to see if this actually gets fixed. But until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.